I requested that we be able to participate in purchasing a SpaceX stock when they did employee tenders, which they did $1 billion twice a year. And they were way oversubscribed early on. And we started buying in 2017. Even though we were a small investor, because we did have a good relationship with them, we were treated just like Saudi Arabia, just like Singapore, just like Abu Dhabi, just like Fidelity. We had the top allocation in each of those purchases, or one of the top 2 or 3, president's family. So we were buyers on all those allocations. And from 2017 to now, we have invested roughly $3 billion, and that, as of June, is worth $25 billion. And it's down since the end of June, but they're still in the 20s. And what we think is that, and we put another $1 billion on the IPO, and we think that over the next 10 or 15 years, we're going to make 20 to 30 or even more times the money that we had invested as of the point of the IPO. So we think we're going to make hundreds of billions of dollars, not billions, hundreds of billions. One interesting story is that one of the analysts, Ishay, went to a dinner the last few days, a Morgan Stanley dinner organized by Adam Jonas, who's the analyst at that company and follows it. And he said, well, for 40 minutes, 45 minutes, the entire conversation was about what's going to happen to the price of shares of SpaceX when the unlock takes place. When unlocks take place, people weren't able to sell their shares. When they can't sell their shares, what takes place? And obviously, the sentiment was extremely negative. And what happened in that period of time is that stock went from 200 to 125, 130, and people, in large part, driven by short sellers. And there's now 630 million shares that are in the public float. 270 million shares have been sold short in the past 2 or 3 weeks. 270 million shares on the basis of what's going to happen to the stock as soon as people were able to sell it. Presumably, they think that everyone's going to want to sell all their shares at the same time immediately. So that's what, and the short sellers, you're pushing it down whenever they can with that narrative. And what people sort of forget about, I guess, is that when it stops going down, there's 270 million shares that people got to buy. And if they don't buy it, they're going to go bankrupt because the company, in our opinion, is going to go up 20, 30, 40 times, and people can't withstand that kind of a price increase if they're sold short. So that's what we think is going to happen. So why? So what is Starlink? What is SpaceX? SpaceX happens to be an incredibly unique business in my entire career. So I've been doing this 56 years. In 56 years, there hasn't been a single company that I've seen like SpaceX, not one. And what is it? So most people think, oh, it's a rocket company. It's way more than that. What it is that initially, the idea was that he wanted to have a rocket you could use over and over again. When I was a patent office examiner in the 1960s, my art was chemistry. And all those nose cone coatings that they put on so that the nose cone wouldn't burn up when it re-entered the atmosphere, I granted those patents. So I've been thinking about rockets since the 1960s. Amazing coincidence. So the idea was that, to reuse rockets. That's the plan. And so when you start thinking about reusing rockets, they said, well, if we reuse rockets, then we're going to need a lot fewer rockets. Why should what else can we do with them? What else we can do with them? That led to Starlink. And Starlink, what that is that that is going to be the internet for the entire world. That is the internet for the entire world. Right now, there's now 8 billion people on the planet. 3 billion don't have the internet. And of the 5 billion that do, it's mostly unsatisfactory. And anyone who's used Starlink says, man, I have never seen anything like this before. This is the best product I've ever had for my boat, for my plane, for my house in the country, for when I travel in the desert on a hiking trip, or it's the best. And so why is that? Because you're connecting to, you don't have to spend $16,000 a mile to connect a hard wire to your house. You carry it on your back in a backpack, $250, $300, you connect right to the satellite, or it's going to be directly on your cell phone. So it is the internet for the planet. Right now, we think that they will be able to do in 10 years. We think in 10 years, that's going to be $1 trillion annual revenue business. It's right now about 15 or 16, 17 billion. We think it's going to be $1 trillion of annual revenues, about a third of it from people subscribing, a third of it, or 40% from the government, and 40% from enterprises. So 25% from individuals, and 40% from the government, 40% from enterprises. And $1 trillion of revenues in 10 years will produce, we think, roughly $700 or $800 billion of profits a year. That means that in 10 years, this company from Starlink alone will be worth, and it's still immature at that point, it'll still be able to grow a lot. Then at that point, we think that's going to be worth somewhere around $14 trillion. $14 trillion for Starlink alone, and the entire company is now being valued for less than $2 trillion. That's number one. Number two is compute AI. So all you read about today in the newspapers is not all you read about, but a big topic is are data centers. And what's the tenor of the conversation? People don't want a data center in their backyard. They don't like the sound, they don't like the appearance, and they don't like the impact it has on the environment, and they don't like the noise, and they don't think they get enough tax revenues. And so states are beginning to react to their constituents and say, you know what, I know we need more data centers for technology, but I don't know, what does technology really need us for anyway at this point? So New York has just banned construction of data centers for next year. The governor of New Jersey just won a race for governor on the basis that data centers are making electricity too expensive. And when you do it in space, by the way, you don't pay anything for electricity because you're using the sun. And you don't use water because you're using cooling from radiators. You have giant radiators that take the heat that's being generated inside of the satellites and shoot it out into space. So no cooling and no electricity costs and no permitting and no 3 or 4 or 5 years to get into space. In fact, one of the things really interesting is that a lot of things are interesting, but one thing that's especially interesting is that it costs on a regular data center on terrestrial on Earth. It costs about $40 or $50 billion right now for a gigawatt. And what they say is that Jensen Huang last week said he thinks it's going to cost $100 billion. And it takes 2 or 3 or 4 years to get these things built, plus a huge amount of capital, a lot of risk, and your community is against you. And so in space, you eliminate cooling costs, you eliminate electricity costs, and instead of a $10 capital cost that other people bear to build on per watt, to build on our planet, it costs us $2. So $10 for everyone else, $2 for us, and that's for capital. And when they spend $10 for capital, they then have to spend $2 a year to maintain. We don't have that expense either because if things don't work, we just close it down and deorbit the satellite. So we assume we're going to last for 5 years. And every 5 years, they get 10 times as powerful as they were they were before. And the satellites might cost 40 or 50% more. But the bottom line is that our costs are dramatically lower. It costs us $2 one time, costs them $10 up front, and $2 a year. That's point number one. Point number two, in order for data centers to work in space, what do you need? You need not just cheap launch to get to space, but also you need to be able to figure out how you're going to get that data that's being produced in space as an inference back to our planet. When you do that, what you need is you need Starlink. So Starlink, you get all those satellites whizzing around. There's 10,000 now, on the way to 20,000. And they say that because of the tremendous demand for data, it's going to be 100,000. They have all the satellites going around. So all you do is from a satellite that is producing this information and data, you shoot it over to Starlink, and Starlink sends it back to the ground. Without Starlink, you can't have these satellites in space. So it all goes together. In order for you to have the space satellites, the space data centers, you need to have a way to get it back. That's Starlink. In order to have there, you have to have rockets that you can use over and over and over again. And the big unlock right now is coming from Starship. And that's going to be the first one. We've had, I guess, about 12 launches so far. They're going to be able to use them in mass sometime this next several months or so. And when you do that, it costs, NASA says, in 2010, it cost to get a kilogram to orbit, it cost $18,500. $18,500 according to NASA in 2010, when you can use a rocket one time. It currently costs us, because we use the rockets over and over like an airplane, it costs us $1,500 per kilogram. And when we sell the service to others, we get $4,000 a kilogram. It's about to, with our new super rocket, with a new rocket ship, Starship, it's going to cost us $150. So NASA was paying $18,500. Other people are paying $4,000 to us, when our cost is $1,500. It's about to cost us $150. So tremendous advantage. Nobody can compete. Nobody can use the rockets over and over again. By the time they can, you're going to be facing a constellation of 1 million satellites for Starlink, and you're going to be for Compute AI, and you're going to be facing 100,000 for Starlink. And then one more thing. So what I'm thinking about, we're thinking about $1 trillion of revenues for Starlink alone in the next 10 years. We think that the revenues you're going to be producing from Compute AI are probably several times what, several trillion instead of this 1 trillion in 10 years. Several trillion. It's a little bit further out, but several trillion. And we can't. And if we're thinking that Starlink alone is going to be worth 14 trillion, and if we're thinking that Compute AI is 3 or 4 times as valuable, and the whole company's being valued for $2 trillion now, that's crazy. And then number 3 is that you need a lot of chips. So if you are TSMC, and this will be the last one I make, if you're TSMC and you're making chips for other people, and we go to you and say, as SpaceX, we need to have 50 times as many chips as you're producing for the entire world every single year. And so they say, well, we can't do that. We have a great business. We can't do that. Go to Samsung, same thing. We can't do that. So we're now building a fab in the United States for $50 billion phase one, $100 billion in total. And we're going to make these chips for inferencing in space. And it's not that they're going to be dramatically cheaper, although we think that they will be 99% cheaper than we're buying from other people. And it's not just the fact that they're cheaper, but the fact that we can't get enough of them from the existing suppliers. The existing suppliers aren't willing to take the risk, so we're going to do it ourselves. Otherwise, we're going to have to slow our growth dramatically. So that's it. We have, one more thing. And the last thing is in AI. So AI is the data centers on the planet, and also, so when you have Anthropic and you have ChatGPT and you have Gemini from Google, what they focused on is building an AI model like the magic inside of a box. The box, you get a spigot going in, brings all the data in the world to the magic box to figure out what to do with it, and then you have a spigot coming out which gives you an answer after you ask it a question, after you give your prompt. That's what this model is right now. What is going to happen is that, so Elon, we have the same thing. We have Grok. And Grok started later than others, although you have to remember, the head of Anthropic was trained by Elon. The head of ChatGPT, was trained by Elon. So he thinks, in fact, most outside observers think that we're very close to being equivalent to Grok, to Anthropic. Very close, but not there. Anthropic is still ahead. But we think that the AI in the box, that's going to be commoditized. Everyone's going to be able to do it. They're not going to be able to have compute, but they're going to be able to do that. So Elon has spent his initial effort on making sure we had the most compute. He thinks that's the barrier to growth. And so what he's done is that we invested in compute. We fell a little bit behind in Grok. He thinks we're going to catch up in Grok in the next several months or so. We'll be the same as Anthropic or close to it, but we'll be cheaper, dramatically cheaper. In addition to that, those guys need compute. So Anthropic comes to Elon, and he's a good guy. He comes to Elon and says, I need compute, otherwise I can't service the customers. I can't meet the demand for my customers. So Elon says, okay, I'll sell it to you. So what we spent in Memphis, going to say, I think $35 billion for, and it took us 122 days. Other people, 3 or 4 years, 122 days, and we doubled it in 90 days. We sold a capacity in that facility to Anthropic for $1.25 billion a month for the next year and a half, about cancelable contracts, but for $15 billion a year, we sold it to him. Then Gemini, Google comes along and says, we need compute also. We don't have enough compute. So Elon says, okay, I'll sell you what I have left for $900 million a month. And then someone else came along for $2 or $3 billion a year. So we have almost $30 billion a year of revenues coming in for assets that we had invested in already that weren't earning a return and weren't likely to earn a return or be needed by Grok for several more months or a year. And so we're now getting $30 billion a year of extra revenues from those assets in the ground that were not producing anything for us. And now we're still growing compute. And now Grok is about to catch up to the others. So where are we going to be then? And the answer is trillions and trillions of dollars in revenues. So the ending comment here is that the United States economy grows, is a $30 trillion economy and grows roughly 7% a year. It doubles every 10 years. 2 or 3% is real, 4 or 5% is inflation. And so that's the economy. Elon believes that instead of doubling every 10 years, because of the innovations that he's bringing to the table here and creating sustainable abundance for everyone, not just for the rich people, for everyone, then what's going to happen here is that the economy, instead of doubling every 10 years, is going to every 10 years in a not long distant future go 10 times growth every 10 years. So instead of doubling every 10 years, he thinks we were about to grow 10 times every 10 years. And remarkable. And if that's the case, then there's going to be universal income, I suppose, and people will feel about whether they can work or not as optional. I'll tell you one thing, Michael's children, my grandchildren, they're going to keep working. And anything's possible. That's how we build our business. And that's how our Baron Capital, when I started in 1982, the book value for Baron Capital was $100,000. $100,000. $10 million under management, $100,000. Book value of Baron Capital is now $4.5 billion. And in addition to that, we have another $1.5 billion of deferred taxes because I haven't sold things. And so therefore, that $100,000 has become $6 billion since 1982. How do you explain that? It's not from buying and selling and trading. It's from being a long-term investor and knowing more about the businesses in which we invest than others. And, your analysts are great, really good report. Really, really good. Just like Goldman's report was good and Morgan Stanley's good. Really good. And so, most people, they can't say, well, how are you going to take $100,000 and make it into 100 million or a billion or 6 billion? How do you do that? And the last example is that we get audited periodically by IRS. And the last time they told me it was, actually, they haven't been there for a while. They used to come every year. Now they haven't come in several years. And the last time he wanted to do an exit interview with me when he was leaving the office. And the exit interview was, he said, well, how did this $6 billion, where'd that come from? Did you raise capital? Did you have an offering? Did you raise extra money? I said, no, this is just being a long-term investor in these businesses and not buying and selling, just buying something that could become much bigger and hanging on. And in that period of time, stocks that we invest, they go up and they go down. But we just kept our eye on what it's going to be in 5 years and 10 years and held. That's how we got to be successful.